Welcome everybody to Make It Make Sense. Happy Wednesday, happy Wellness Wednesday. I know we've been bringing you a lot that will make you hopefully healthy, wealthy, wise, informed, feeling safer, smarter, smoother in these streets. But here at Make It Make Sense, just as a reminder, if it's your first time being with us, we vow to cut down the noise and the rhetoric and the bickering that has become commonplace in our news programming and bring you the truth. We're bringing you fact-based, data-driven news commentary on hot topics and important things for our community, for our country, and for our world. So since we've started, you can go back and look at all the shows. They're all in my Instagram feed, and they are on my public page and Facebook. And we have covered everything from medical news in the pandemic to police misconduct to voting to financial management and wealth building, so many things. Mental health topics we have covered. We've talked about police misconduct and had such exciting expert guests. And today is no different. As I told you, it's Wellness Wednesday. And I have asked someone to come on who I've admired from afar and I'm just very excited about, and that is Dr. Dion Metzger. She is a doctor of medicine. She received that from Morehouse School of Medicine. She completed her psychiatry residency at Emory University. She's a board certified psychiatrist, and she completed her medical research at Stanford. You've seen her everywhere. She's been on The Doctor, she's been on TV, CBS, NBC, ABC, in the New York Times, you name it. But today she is with us, which makes me super, super, super excited. So I'm going to let her in. We've covered a lot of topics, including some aspects of mental health, but I've watched videos of yours and seen the messages that you share, and just really the help that you bring to Black women on how to live better, healthier lives. And I know that your motto is better mind, better life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I thought I would start there. What does that mean, and how do we implement it?
Yeah, the whole thing with that motto is me just wanting people to prioritize their mental health. Because honestly, when we're thinking about our overall health, we tend to focus on the physical aspect of it. But I really wanted it to be simple and straightforward, but just reminding people how much our mental is such a big part of our happiness in terms of being physically and mentally healthy. So that was really the main thing I wanted to do with that motto, is just have people remember to focus on their mental health when they're prioritizing things in their life.
And what does it mean, really, to focus on our mental health? Because I think that for so many people, especially Black women, we think the struggle is baked in. And so if we're stressed, if we're anxious, if we're foggy, if we're running at both ends, if those things are happening, we've been conditioned to think that's just life. But it's not just life.
It's not just life. And I think, with us being strong Black women, that is kind of like a double-edged sword, where we are expected to work really hard, take care of the family, and be the ones that everybody comes to for support, but who's supporting us? And I think it's just a way that it's kind of been ingrained in us for us always to be the strong ones of the family and being taking care of everybody else. And what I found is that as a result, a lot of Black women are suffering in silence and dealing with depression and dealing with anxiety, and sometimes just pushing it off, just thinking, this is how life should be. I should feel this way. I should have these severe depressive symptoms, even if it's premenstrually, for 7 to 10 days a month. It almost become ingrained that the suffering is normal, and it is absolutely not normal. So I think with my platform, it was such a big thing to me, because in my practice, I noticed that Black women were more hesitant to seek care than white women. Even me living in Atlanta, the city where there's definitely a larger Black population, but still, I just noticed that I'd have women kind of reach out to me privately and said, I think I really need to see somebody, but I'm not sure. And I don't know if I'm sick enough to see a psychiatrist. And I said, there's no such thing as being sick enough. You know, I wanted people to know that it's really just about getting an evaluation. If there's something that I can treat, why not treat it? Because treating something like depression or anxiety, it can literally change the whole game and change your quality of your life. So I always try to promote people just seeking the evaluation of just seeing somebody to really realize that, you know, it doesn't, life doesn't have to be this hard.
Now, what's the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and how do you know which one you need to see?
Oh, good question. So you can see either of us. So if you have a suspicion of depression or anxiety or feeling stressed out, it doesn't even have to be an official diagnosis. It could be burnout. It could be just feeling overwhelmed with being a new mom. Whatever it is, you can go to either of us, a psychologist or a psychiatrist. The difference between us is that a psychiatrist went to medical school. So that's an actual full MD, meaning that we are a physician, we can prescribe medications in addition to doing therapy. A psychologist is a PhD, so meaning that, you know, they study the whole art of psychology and they're focused on the therapy aspect. So sometimes we will work with both. Like I have some patients who see me for the medication part and they see the psychologist for the therapy. But if you just want to do an initial evaluation, you can go to either of us. We do evaluations just to see how you're doing. I saw somebody ask a question about a licensed counselor. Yes. So, and like an LCSW is like a licensed social worker or a family therapist. You can go to them for therapy too. So, for if you're seeking somebody just to have someone to talk to, it doesn't have to be just a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It can be a social worker. It can be a family therapist. I actually did something with Essence that was a really good breakdown, and it was for Black women actually breaking down how to seek therapy, how to find your therapist. And I'll send you the link if you ever want to share it. Just talking about what's the difference, because I think that's also a barrier where people get confused and they're like, wait, well, there's so many different, there's all these different people and all these letters after their names. Who do I see? And I don't want that to be a barrier for people seeking treatment.
Yes, absolutely. And I can, when you send it to me, guys, when I post this interview, I will put in the caption the
Mm-hmm.
link so you can get the information there. Because one of the things we were talking about earlier in the week is all of the stigma that still exists in the Black community with
Yeah.
respect to seeking help, not for our toe or for our heart or for our ears, but when we start talking about the mind, then it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, ain't nothing wrong with my mind. What can you say to somebody else if you see some things that you know are not like what they have been in the past and are triggers or red flags to you that could be, you know, not a hard sell, but a soft opener to the conversation about the fact that they may need to get some help?
Yeah, you know, and the thing is, I think within our community, it's definitely a stigma to it. So, you know, I do applaud the younger generation because the younger generation talks about their therapist like no problem. Like they're like, oh, I went to therapy. You know, the younger generation. When I say that, I mean like 30 and younger. They have really done a great job in normalizing going to therapy. But I do think the older generations, it's just it's something that if you go to therapy, it's seen as a weakness, and it absolutely is the opposite. It's a strength, right? If you're wanting to seek help for it, I always tell people that it's a sign of strength that you want to be your best self. So if you're seeing somebody and you have some concerns about them just not seeming like themselves, and depression is an anxiety or some things that can present like anxiety can present as irritability. Like, are they just way more irritable than they used to be? Or depression, are they not wanting to come out as much? Or do they seem a little bit more ungroomed, like something like their appearance? I mean, depression is sometimes something we can see. Just little things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be episodes of crying or people having panic attacks. Depression and anxiety can present in different ways. But I think really open-ended questions tend to work the best. Like, how are you doing? You know, is there anything I can do to help? One thing that's been really helpful, and I have this when I have family members who reach out to me, or even on Instagram, where they're like, well, I think my spouse is depressed, or I think, you know, my daughter's going through something. What can I do to help them without them kind of being defensive? And I said, you know, when you're asking how they're doing, also offer to help find somebody for them to talk to, because sometimes even making that initial phone call to a therapist is such a huge task for people. So, you know, offering to make that first phone call, and very often people's first phone call where they start seeing me is because a family member called me and scheduled the appointment. So, it's sometimes really hard when you're really in that dark place to go ahead and schedule the appointment with a professional. So even offering to help them find somebody to talk to is actually could be really helpful.
We have been I feel like for it literally is 2 years now and
Mhm.
counting in a pandemic
Yeah.
that has left people in various stages and cycles of grief.
Mhm.
What advice do you give, even if, I mean, there's so much physical death in this country,
Exactly.
we're headed to 1 million people that we've lost. So that's millions of family members
Mhm.
represented there, and communities that are affected. But what do you suggest people do in order to deal with whether it's physical grief or loss of job or loss of
Yeah.
identity or
Yeah.
any of those phases?
And I think the first thing is recognizing that it's grief. When the pandemic first started, I said that there's something where we're grieving our previous life, right? We're grieving
Yes,
some of us who are
yes.
driving to work, or some of us who are able to travel and visit family, or these homecoming events that you look forward to doing annually that was kind of part of your lifestyle taken away so quick. It's a form of grief. So I think first step is recognizing that to grieve your former life prior to March 2020 is normal. It's something to be expected. And also with the pandemic, I think what happened is that the world went upside down so quickly. It was like we didn't really have any preparation for it. It was like all of a sudden, okay, everything's canceled. Everybody had to stay home. So that was just a shocker, and that was kind of really jolting for us. We got used to it, but the initial response to it was pretty difficult. And where people noticed that now that you're home and you're with your emotions, you're noticing some of the things that you're able to distract yourself with before. So for a lot of people, they were noticing, okay, this is really depression, or even, being inside during the winter time and not having as much exposure to sunlight. They were just noticing how the seasons do affect their mood. Kind of a positive of the pandemic is I do think it made people really realize some of the mental health symptoms that they were dealing with, and made them kind of slow down and take the time to address it. But it's been overwhelming. It's been overwhelming. I mean, even in my practice, I mean, I've reached a cap because just the number of phone calls tripled over the pandemic compared to where it was before. And because people are in crisis, and I think we do have to recognize that this is a mental health crisis that we're in. Things like I have people who have never had a psychiatric hospitalization before are having them now. And I also, in addition to grief, this is also trauma, right?
Yep.
So you are being exposed to all of this death. You know of somebody who has died of COVID. Everybody at this point, I think at this point in time, if you don't have a family member or friend, you know of a family member or friend who had somebody die of COVID.
Yep.
Like that is how widespread it has gotten.
Yep.
So I think, you have to realize that all of these images that you're seeing on a constant basis, I mean, the news, social media, a lot of people forget that social media is a form of intake. When you're seeing all of those images and everything and hearing about the tolls and the numbers, it is taking its toll on you. So I have to kind of tell people that it's okay to limit your intake. So it means if you love CNN, you love watching the news all the time, and it means you got to take a day off that you just don't watch any. That's okay. I mean, I think we need a break from all of the images and all of the. It's scary to hear about a deadly virus literally every day. So we have to figure out how to manage this, and it's not something that's going to it's not something that's just going to magically go away as quickly as it came in. But I think realizing that we have to have a protective bubble around us with so much of this COVID exposure is really, really important. And making a decision in terms of what you want to do in terms of your life, because there's some of us have a decision that we want to go out, we want to travel, and some of us are not ready to do that yet. And I kind of think respecting everybody's decision is really important for relationships, because not everybody is ready to be out and traveling and on a plane or, going to the gym. And, just because they might not be ready for it is no reason for there to be a conflict between the two people.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that about news intake and social
Yeah.
media intake.
Hmm.
I'm a newsie for
Hmm.
sure, but I
Yes.
started this show because I was finding my daily intake not just anxiety building and frustrating, but also with minimum actual useful information. Because I mean, everything just ain't breaking news. You know, they say breaking news and give you that music as a trigger on purpose for the cycle.
Then that's become a trigger now, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And
Mm-hmm.
so now we're doing it with the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's over and over. And it's not that those things aren't important. I just think that there has to be like a soft entry level in our lives where we can still get that information, but not bombard ourselves to the point that, and I surprised myself. I cut off everything for 3 days and I had a new lease on life.
Wasn't it like a complete difference though, right? It's like completely different when you have that just kind of cut off from exposure. And like for me, like my thing was I was on Facebook and I realized like that for me was a little bit too much. Just all of these triggers for some reason, everybody has a different medium that's a little bit more triggering than others.
Yeah.
And mine was just kind of everybody giving commentary on the pandemic and people judging people's pictures because they don't have masks on. And I was just like, no. So even for me personally, in addition to what I tell my patients, you have to really protect yourself. I think this is a time that us putting a protective bubble is so important.
Yeah.
So important, because we're going to get through this. We're going to get through this, but we have to really protect ourselves mentally.
Well, I just have one more question. I know your time is valuable, but I really wanted to talk about caregivers.
Yes.
Because in addition to the physical death and loss, there's so many people that have now ongoing trauma in their families and ongoing health issues in their families. I'm a caregiver as a mom because my oldest child is on the autism spectrum.
I have two boys on the autism spectrum, so I know.
And
I
so
totally understand.
we live the caregiver life, but do you
And
have
it's daily.
Yes. Any suggestions
Yeah.
for how to take care of yourself in that space?
Oh, it's such, it really goes back to that saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. And it's something that, with me having two children and also being a caregiver, and I realized that I'm not my best unless I'm taking care of myself. So for me, I'm very much a work hard, play hard type of person, on purpose. It's because I think I can be the best psychiatrist and the best mom that I am if I'm happy. So I think balance is really, really important. It's especially if you're naturally a giver. It is so easy to give continuously and have an empty cup. It is absolutely so easy. I mean, I've been in that position myself. And then, once you get there and you realize you're completely running on E, it's kind of a learning lesson. You don't want to go back. But I really realized that it was, that I just couldn't give anymore. So I think caregivers, it's just really important, even more important for us to have balance. And sometimes caregivers they feel guilty for taking the time away from themselves. So whether they need to take some respite and take 2 days away or take these vacations or, whatever it is, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Always try to remind people that in order for you to be the best caregiver that you can be, you have to be the happiest caregiver you are. And so you really need to learn to have that balance. And I see this even with people who have like older aging parents who may be dealing with dementia. Sometimes you really can see it get pretty heavy for the kids and they're just dealing with a lot and trying to, we call it kind of the sandwich generation where they're trying to take care of their own kids and also taking care of their parents. And you can see that just really take its weight there in terms of the toll it takes on them mentally.
Absolutely. Because you're dealing with the people who you always look to for the advice and the instruction and the roles reversed.
And you're kind of taking care of both on both ends. Yeah. So, just really trying to, and, I tell people self-care is not anything that's a strict definition. It doesn't mean just getting facials and doing yoga. If your self-care is literally sitting and watching Netflix for 3 hours and eating some cookies, that's self-care. Whatever it is that brings you joy and brings you peace, it falls under that umbrella of self-care.
Amen. Because some of the self-care rituals can turn into a job.
I try yoga. I really, really try to get into it, but it's not so much self-care for me.
Right.
So, it's everybody's definition of self-care is very different. So I try to remind people that, there's no playbook. for it. It's whatever you want to do. If it means just sitting and laying under your weighted blanket, I have a patient who just says that just sitting under her weighted blanket and reading a book is bliss.
Oh, that sounds like heaven right now.
Yeah.
Okay. I want my weighted blanket. I used to have one for my son. He
I'm
was the
obsessed.
best.
I
And
am
he calmed
obsessed with
him
that.
right down. I'm glad you said that.
I'm obsessed. I have about 3 in my house right now. So I would, if anybody is a weighted blanket, I will sponsor. Please, please. It wants to sponsor me because I love them. I will talk about them daily.
Okay. Okay, so last, can you tell people who are just getting started, who think they need help for themselves or a loved one, what are the trusted sources they can go to?
Oh, good. That's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah, so the reliable source, and this is the one I always send people to, is Psychology Today. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people call themselves therapists, but aren't necessarily licensed therapists. I want people to be able to go to licensed therapy. I think Psychology Today, you can, based on your insurance, you can base it on the area, you can see pictures because it's okay to want a therapist who's a certain gender or a certain age or a certain race, because the whole point is you want to be able to have that rapport. So I think being able to see pictures is also important. And yeah, Psychology Today, and just they tell you the different types of therapists, and then I'll send you that link from Essence that I did, just kind of separating how to know what does what would be really helpful.
And do you think that therapy is cost prohibitive? Sometimes
Oh, yes, yes.
don't
And
see
that's,
it because they think they can't afford it.
they think they can't afford it. Yeah, and that's the reason why, and the thing is, a lot of people think there's a theory that, therapy is a luxury. It's a very common a stigma thing that it was thought of a white luxury, right? It wasn't something that we did, or if we did, only the rich could do it. That's not true. That's not true. Right now, I think even within the pandemic, because of such a mental health crisis that we've been in, more people, more insurances are giving better benefits in terms of covering visits. But a lot of people don't know that mental health visits are covered under their insurance. So it's always worthwhile that's why I actually chose Psychology Today as a great one to go to, because you can actually filter who takes your insurance.
Okay.
And even if you don't have insurance, a lot of therapists do sliding scale. So meaning that they base it on your income and then go from there. Another thing is, I know I did it when I was in residency at Emory. If you want to work with residents, they do a sliding scale. Like if you want to have the residents see you as their therapist, that's also an idea if you have a local university in your city.
Okay, that is so super helpful. Psychology Today, everybody, you guys, and I gave them a source earlier in the week that I just found on whitehouse.gov for people that I think if you have Medicare and Medicaid, that's still considered insurance for some. So there are options available. Okay. But I appreciate you for being with us today.
Thank you for the invite.
I'm going to go back and read my notes. That's what I say. Every time we have somebody on here, I'm trying to take notes while I go because I'm used to being a student. But this show will be posted, everyone. And you see Dr. Dion's Instagram handle is here. What is your website, Dr. Dion?
Same thing, DionMetzgerMD.com. So same thing as my Instagram handle, all one word. And it's also my Twitter as well. So Dion Metzger MD.
Y'all look her up. Thank you so much.
Look me up.
Okay, have a great day.
All right, thanks. You too. Bye.
So guys, we were joined yet again today by someone who knows their stuff and knows what they're talking about. And that's what I want to bring you all the time as Black women, especially. I can't talk about anybody but Black women because that's the ones I know. And I know everybody has a challenge and a struggle, but bringing people to us who are uniquely qualified and experienced to treat our cares and concerns is very important to me. And so I hope that you found that this was useful and that you're finding all of the programming to be useful. Make sure you look at the show from yesterday and the day before that. I think this is our 13th now, for which I'm very thankful. And tomorrow we are having another great show where we're going to be talking about Black and missing and just the terrible situation that exists in the United States where when our girls and women go missing, nobody pays attention. So we have a guest, special guest, who want to talk about it and figure out what we can do about it. If you enjoy the content and are learning, please support us. You can look up in the bio my link tree, and there are several different ways you can join Patreon, or you can support us with a one-time gift or donation. So please, please do, so that we can keep it coming. Thank you so much for joining. I will see you tomorrow live at noon. God bless.